Okay, I can go first. So I think it's important to combine healing and climate education because sometimes awareness can be overwhelming. Even as an average person, when you're constantly exposed to education and a lot of information about climate change and what is going on with our planet, it can be very overwhelming. And so it's important to connect healing with awareness creation because climate change in itself is very emotional, and healing can help ease anxiety. Even if most of the time we are not aware, but talking about climate change leads to eco anxiety where we are constantly worrying about our future, the kind of planet that we are going to leave behind. And even as we do this, as we continue educating ourselves and working towards creating a more sustainable world, it's important to also counter that with taking care of ourselves. And that's why it's important to for healing and climate justice to go hand in hand. Yeah.
I love that answer. I definitely feel myself very anxious sometimes about, the future we have in store, considering that sometimes governments are not necessarily giving the topic enough attention.
Yeah.
So I can really relate to that on a personal level.
Yeah, I could go next. And this is a very interesting question, if I could just comment, because often we sideline healing. But just to add on what Daisy has said, is that when you're talking about climate change, one of the things we need to understand is that climate change is now recognized as the human face of health, meaning that we cannot talk about health without talking about climate change. And to make it more important is because right now climate change is now becoming severe, and especially in the global south, and this is characterized by high heat. We have heat waves right now. We have extreme weather, and what we all need to understand is that this has an implication on our own health, and that's why it's important that we are not only educating the society about what this climate is, but actually we people from the public health and other medical practitioners should understand how important it is even to include this part of climate change into hospitals, into treatment, because I was doing a recent project and it was looking at the impact of heat on pregnant women. And it is very shocking to realize that even a slight increase in temperature, it puts the fetus at risk. And for me, these are the heartbreaking statistics that not only does our community not know, but now we see there's a lot of women losing their babies right now just because they are not informed. And that's why, to answer your question, it is very important to bring that healing aspect, because climate change is with us, and climate change is impacting our body for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to just also mention the fact that, there is some intersectionality with class and gender, because of course, some people, not everyone can afford an AC at home. And these kinds of things are important to also recognize and acknowledge in these kinds of discussions.
Just to also add on, I think these are also cross-cutting issues, the issues of health and the issue of climate education. And I also feel like we cannot continue going and speaking more about climate change when we don't address the issue of climate education and the issue of health. Because as you all know, we are on the forefront of the climate crisis. We are being affected as women, as young people. And as we are being affected, we're also being affected with our health. And if you also trying to look at communities who are also on the forefront of the climate crisis are being affected health-wise, and bringing in the aspect of healing within the climate change discourse, I think it's very vital to ensure that we educate and we bring about climate healing tools within our surroundings and our communities to ensure that whatever we're going through, but there's also a healing process within it. As much as we are educating about it, but are we safe? Are we healthy? Are we able to even come back and also educate other people? Because we just don't want to educate ourselves, but also continue educating other people. So ourselves, are we healthy? Are we in the right state of mind? Do we have anxiety? Because all of these is we cannot continue with the work that we're doing when ourselves we haven't healed, when ourselves we are not in a right position to continue making a difference. So I also think that it's very important and vital to ensure that these cross-cutting issues are integrated to ensure that we are also in a safe and healthy environment.
Absolutely. I think that's really powerful to recognize that, as you guys are activists, you need time and energy to be focused on also healing yourself and being okay. Because the work that you guys are doing is very intense and draining. So I appreciate the work that you guys are doing and also just taking the time to have this really powerful conversation and amplifying the voices of African women, which is, often sidelined, unfortunately, in the discussion of climate crisis. So I'd like to move on to the next question, which is how does rest, slowness, or ritual show up in your work as an act of resilience to burnout or even over extraction?
Okay, so I really like this question, especially because highlighting rest as an act of resilience, because for most of us, there's so much guilt attached to rest, even when we are advocating for positive impact in our communities. So personally, just intentionally taking a step back from the work that you're doing, deciding to intentionally take a break and take care of myself, which involves like not pushing myself further than I can take, and also in relation to our environment, allowing myself to step outside, to be in the sun, like just connect with nature directly. I would say like that is a form of using rest as resistance, because I'm very blessed to be at home right now, like in my village. So there's a lot of green spaces, and just having the opportunity to experience that, to appreciate that I get to have this space, I think is a form of resistance. And also just intentionally taking a pause and creating that ritual for myself, taking care of myself, even as I reflect on the kind of work that we are doing in terms of advocacy and creating awareness. Yeah, so I would say like intentionally deciding to take a break.
I love that. Rest is an act of resilience. That's beautiful.
To add on what Daisy is saying is that one of the things we need to recognize as climate change advocates is that this work is heavy. This work is really heavy. It's really a unique kind of work, and especially because right now we continue to see the diverse and the severe impact of climate change. And in that sense, when we rest as advocates, one, it also helps us to reflect critically on the kind of work we are doing, which is really important because when you rest, you're able to see the impact you made, the mistakes you made. You're also able to take care of yourself and have that reflexive moment. In public health, we really encourage reflexivity. This is where you're taking a step back to reflect on the kind of work you're doing. And this is a form of resilience because it is through reflection, it is through resting, it is through taking care of yourself that then you're able to have the strength to move on to the next step. Because one of the things I keep telling myself as a climate change enthusiast is that this work is never going to end because there's so many people we need to educate, there's so much work, there's so much policy we need to influence. And so we need to see or start seeing rest as actually as a tool, as part of us, as part of our work, because at the end of the day, we're human beings, we get tired. So it's really important to take that rest because it helps us to even become more impactful in our work in a sense that you're also able to reflect and see the steps forward. And for me, I think that also it's a really great question. Yeah.
I love that. I agree with you a lot that rest is a great time to reflect, and also just humanly needed. And I think that we all just need to acknowledge that sometimes.
Yeah, and just to add on to what my other co-speakers had highlighted, I also think prioritizing rest is not to do much. I mean, at times we want to focus on quantity, but instead more prioritizing on the quality of the work that you're producing. And I also feel like as climate activists and we in the workspace that we're in, it's a very what can I say? It's very intense, especially the work that we do on the ground. And I feel like it's very important to reflect on, is it really worth it not to give myself some time to rest so that I can pick up myself and keep on going? But also I feel like resting for me is more prioritizing on the type of work that I'm producing and taking time to myself to say, I need to say no, I need to take a break so that I can also continue the work tomorrow. Because the more it's a lot, but I definitely need to take a rest as an individual, but also we cannot take care of the planet or to take care or to influence change when we are not able to take care of ourselves. So it also goes back to individual self-care before we go up and wake up and say we are going to the world and give out the positive aspect that I want in the world, because resting also gives a time to have positive thoughts so that I can come back and make a difference positively. Because when I've rested, I've already given time to myself to pick up myself, to go back positively and make a difference. So it's really important. And also it gives resilience and bravery within ourselves that we're able to pick up ourselves once we have rested, to also continue the work that we're doing despite how hectic it is, the barriers that we face as individuals. So yeah.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. And I do think that it's important to note that, of course, we can't take care of the planet if we're not in a good state ourselves. So, in line with that, what does it look like to honor traditional or cultural ways of healing while also addressing urgent global crises?
Maybe I can go first on that one. I think there's need for us to marry each other, the issue of traditional knowledge and the technological and new innovations of the way of living that we are in now. And going back to our roots, I feel like it's more of our culture, our norms and values, where we come from and how we integrate that. And I also think it's very important to integrate the issue of our traditional knowledge systems that are already in place, and to recognize them because they do work. They've been working for the long time and they are continue working, and we cannot dismiss that in any way. But also because the advancement that are coming in, I feel like there's also need for them to marry each other to ensure that we're not sidelining, or we are not saying no to what has been helping us over the past years. For example, we talk of healing through traditional norms and values that we have in our communities, and dismissing that, I also feel like it's a more of saying no to our culture or saying no to our roots. So it's more like going back to say, do we know ourselves when we are doing our work that we're doing? What position are we in to ensure that we carry that with ourselves? We carry this traditional knowledge systems that we have when we're doing the work that we're doing. So I also think there's need for us to marry the new ways of living and the traditional norms and values that are already or have been in place for the longest time.
Yeah, to add on that, I think you've really said it well, Tafadzwa. To add on that, one thing we need to realize is that when talking about climate change and health, is that it is a global issue. It is, and that is what makes it very complex. But one of the things also we need to recognize and appreciate is that as it affects our different communities, we all have our different cultures. And even in our advocacy work, we're dealing with different communities who have different cultures. And so when you have that understanding, it helps you appreciate that embedding culture in healing is very important. One of the things we are taught is that we need to understand the community we are serving. We need to understand how do they do, how do they carry on their lives. And in that sense, also, how do they protect themselves during climate change? And what are some of these measures that we suggest to them that aligns with their culture? Because at the end of the day, we are doing this for the community. So it's really important to be cautious about our culture. But also, one of the things that I'd like to add is that culture is evolving so much, and especially in the world that we're in the world of technology. So it's also nice to try and embed new additions into our cultures. I know we are Africans, and sometimes we could be really receptive about things, but also we as advocates, we understand maybe some cultures are outdated, and so even when we step into those communities, it is important to be mindful about how do we then educate this community about the new culture, the new ways that are more effective, the new ways that will bring more change and in a faster way, because at the end of the day, climate change is not waiting for anyone. And that's what I could add on to that.
Thank you, Sharleen and Tafadzwa. I think what I can add on what both of you have shared is an example of a way that we can create space to use indigenous knowledge that has been passed down from generations to generations when dealing with global issues such as climate justice and also healing as a community. I think one way can be using storytelling and advocacy as part of healing and as also part of climate awareness. I believe that across Africa, across different cultures, storytelling has been used to pass knowledge from one generation to another. And I believe this can also be a way to heal as a community while also working on issues such as climate change. So yeah, that is one platform that I would say can be used as a way to merge healing and solving global issues. Yeah.
I love that. I think you all make really good points. And I do think that it's really important to acknowledge the communities that we work with, but also our own norms, traditions, and cultural wisdoms for dealing with issues in general and dealing with communities. So the last question that I have for you all, then I'll move into more individual questions. If this webinar could plant one seed in people's minds today, what would that be?
I would say conscious care doesn't have to be large scale. It's something that we can do. We can take small steps as individuals. Even just checking on your neighbor, checking on the small community that you built with your friends and the people living around you, and encouraging each other to advocate. I think one thing I will say is just taking ownership of the change, because in most cases, when we think about issues such as climate change, it's like it's an issue that is far away from me. Like so long as I don't feel it personally, I feel like maybe someone else can deal with that. So I would just like to encourage ownership. I read something very interesting on Twitter when there were the LA fires in California earlier this year, and someone was saying climate change is the kind of disaster that you will see through your camera until it gets close to you, and that's when you realize, oh, it's on my doorstep. So I would encourage taking ownership even in seeking out information and knowledge, and the different ways that we can take action as individuals, because I believe that is part of conscious care, intentionally checking in and intentionally deciding to play a role. So I would say that that is one thing I would encourage everyone to take from this webinar. Yeah.
I think Daisy, you've really said it so well, and I've actually taken note of what you've said. And I think it's true what you're saying, that you can never relate until the disaster is at your doorstep. And this reminds me of the floods we had in Kenya, which were very severe. A lot of people died, so it was very chaotic. And yeah, I think that brings me to my point, is that for those who are here, what I'd love people to know, and I think this is really tied to the kind of also advocacy work that I am doing, or we are doing, is that for people to be aware that climate change and health is not a one person's issue. Just as Daisy has said, it's all about ownership. But I'd also add that this field, it needs all of us. It needs all of us. When you hear about climate change, it's a very polarized topic, in a way that even right now, sometimes I'm based in Canada, and the people who are there, they don't even recognize that climate change is real. We have politicians saying that's nature, that's how it is. But we in Africa, we have a different story. And my urge is that this space, climate change, is meant for everyone. Right now, we need creative minds to tell us how we're going to educate the community about climate change. We also need another set of people to tell us how do we live consciously, how do we take care of ourselves. We need another group of people to tell us how are we going to remove the emissions. We need another group to tell us how do we empower our communities to be healthy in a way that everybody is at par and understands what is happening. So for me, my call is for everybody to embrace climate change, and in a way that uh, to have that sense of you can bring different solutions to the table. And I think that for me is my goal, or my wish, to see that everybody is taking a sense of belonging to this challenge, and trying to see what are some of those creative ways that we can bring to our community. And one of the last things I'll also mention is that let us not lose the sense of culture. Culture is very important for Africans, for us Africans. Culture drives our lives. And so even as we do that, it will be nice to see how should we do this in a way that we preserve our culture, and in a way that we don't necessarily try to copy what the global north are doing, because the global north, they have their own different climate change impacts them differently, not as severely as us. So it is really a call to everyone that climate change is not only for climate change professionals, but for everybody who exists in this community. It is our responsibility to make our community healthy and a better place to live, even for the future generations. I know I've said a lot, but I hope we could pick a thing or two.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100% there.
I think for me is I would describe it in 3 words. Probably it will be resting, healing, and resilience. And to know that we are not alone in the fight of climate justice. We are together, and it's okay to take a break, and it's okay to rest, and it's okay to heal. so that we can also come back and continue making a difference and continue inspiring other people and making a difference in our communities. So that is how I would describe my seeds that I would put in this webinar. And just to say to anyone else who's been in the space or who has experienced climate change, I mean, we are all experiencing climate change, but who has been impacted directly, that you're not alone and we are together in the fight. Yes.
Absolutely. I think you've all made really powerful points. So with that, I'd like to move to some questions directed for women care. So Daisy and Charlene. You focus on educating women about the health impacts of climate change. What are some of the most urgent or overlooked issues in this area?
Can go first. One of the urgent issues, and I'm talking about Michelle. When we do this, we are working with senior medical students from Egerton University, and the culture here is that when you're a senior medical student, you have an opportunity to do medical rounds in one of the county government hospitals. So they do that as part of their practicality. And one of the urgent needs that we are realizing is that how the lack of information and awareness among our women leads to severe medical situations. I'm talking about, we have mothers who have lost their babies at 6, 7, 9 months, just because they did not understand that interconnectedness of how climate change has affected their health. Another thing we see is that how, just because they're not aware of that, they're not only able to take care of themselves, but also that moves even into the household. So let me give an example. Right now, let's say there's a point in Kenya where when we had heat waves, and when a mother doesn't know that that's climate change, then they're not able even to empower their children, maybe to practice healthy hydration. Maybe when there's floods, in my community, we recently lost a kid just because the floods swept them off, and it was not only during just recently that they're now repairing their roads because they're realizing, oh, the climate change now is getting severe. So that lack of awareness, it degrades the quality of life for women, especially in our health. And we have a category, especially the expectant women. They're not aware of this, and this has led to a high rising number of stillbirths and even how they take care of their kids. So for me, that's the biggest, seeing a child dying just because they were not aware of how to take care of themselves. In that, I think for me it's really heartbreaking. Maybe Daisy, you could add on to that.
Yeah. To break down what you said, I would say another factor that is overlooked mostly is how climate change directly impacts reproductive and maternal health care in terms of accessibility. For example, a few months back when Nairobi was flooding, the priority is usually to get shelter and food, but healthcare services, specifically reproductive healthcare and maternal healthcare, is not really a priority, and this leads to women and girls being affected disproportionately. So there are higher cases of abortion, and if women and girls cannot access, let's say, contraceptive services, it means a lot of women are going without reproductive health care, increasing the number of women who are also conducting unsafe abortions. So I would say that's a factor that is largely overlooked. And tying into that also, for pastoralist communities, let's say in the northeastern parts of Kenya, the women and girls are usually in charge of fetching water. So they have to walk long distances to fetch water. So the hotter it is, the longer they have to walk, which increases the risk of gender-based violence when they are attacked along the way, early marriages, because when there's drought, families cannot sustain themselves. And so one of the options they usually fall back on is to marry off their daughters in order to get food or a way to sustain the family in this harsh weather. So it increases the chances of young girls being married off early. And I think this area is usually overlooked with how climate change impacts gender specifically, and also mental health care. Because I would talk in the context of Kenya, conversations about climate change are usually very polarized, like Sharleen mentioned before. It's easy for people to overlook it as a Western issue. And so it affects the way mental health care is also addressed in terms of climate change and climate justice. It's definitely an area that needs more attention and more research, even as we work to building more inclusive solutions. So I would say accessibility to healthcare, specifically for women and girls, is an area that is largely overlooked.
Wow. I mean, I can only imagine how, the cutting of funding to USAID as well as to UN has really put more pressure on limited resources already given to these issues. And it's devastating to see the effects. So I just hope that things like this webinar can work to help to, shed some light, and we can do our part in helping people become more aware of this really pressing issue. So how do you guys think that climate adaptation and health systems could better serve women and marginalized communities?
Thank you, Michelle, for that question. I think the first thing is that we need to realize that amidst climate change, women's health are very unique. Women's health are very unique, and we have very unique needs. So just putting that in mind, I will really help the kind of funding to venture into those unique health needs of women. So if I could give an example, and this is to also touch on the reproductive health, if there's something women are still, and not only women in Kenya, but also women in general are still struggling with, is that right now we have the rise of I think I've forgotten the technical term, but period cramps. What we don't understand is that period cramps, they are also the intensity of that lately is also impacted by climate change. So when it's too hot, then we have maybe, let's say, your cramps are too painful, or when it's too cold. And right now we are having those extremes in that sense. So kind of understanding that we can never view women's health the same way we view men, and that's because our bodies are built differently. And I feel like for me that's a first step of creating change, because then we'll be able to pull out these different intersectionalities, just as Daisy has broken them down, and being able to put more focus and more attention on women. And also just it will also spark one thing, that we need more experts in this field. We need more research. We need to understand, okay, when the temperatures are high and when your fetus is impacted to this extent, what then should we do? So when we do that, we are able to invest more in medical practitioners who can also come in and take care of these unique needs. And when we do that, for sure, we're going to see more happiness in the society, because they say when women are happy, everybody is happy. And not only that, but healthier communities, healthier women. And I think for me, that's the vision and the goal I hope to see in my advocacy work in future. Yeah, Daisy.
Yeah. So to strengthen climate adaptation and health systems, I would say, building on what you said, and also Choma's comment in the chat box, intersectionality, coming up with solutions that are intersectional and inclusive, because in most cases, most existing solutions, climate change is usually viewed as a standalone issue, even when coming up with solutions without considering the way that it interacts with other global challenges such as healthcare, even issues such as urbanization. Because I believe we don't experience climate change the same way. So it's important to come up with solutions that highlight all of these sectors, and also centering women's voices. It's very important for women to be at the table when discussing, even trying to understand how climate change is disproportionately affecting women and girls. So creating a platform where women's voices are centered, about healthcare, about climate adaptation, ensuring that the systems are both equitable and they're rooted in inclusivity and also collective memory. Just as you've mentioned before, it's community work. You can go far as an individual, but we all need to work together. So systems that encourage inclusivity, and yeah, that's that's what I would add.
Yeah, I think that you both make really good points, and it's very true that expertise is really lacking in this field, unfortunately. Climate change in general and health is unfortunately a bit more of a new topic under research, and especially considering intersectionality into that. I mean, sometimes intersectionality, some people don't even know what that is. So education, expertise, research, it's all very important in that. But what do you guys think of ancestral knowledge or traditional healing in relation to climate resistance? How do you hold space for that in the work that you do?
So for women care specifically, we hold space for ancestral knowledge by centering community elders as a way to contribute to our knowledge. For example, the way we work is we have advocacy platforms such as workshops where we create awareness about how climate change intersects with women's health. And we cannot do this work without consulting with the elders in the community. Let's say teachers who engage with day-to-day students and even administrative leaders. I also work specifically on maternal health care, and one of the techniques that I use in order to encourage indigenous knowledge is to consult with administrative leaders, let's say chiefs in the communities, because they understand how communities work and how they pass knowledge to each other. So we use the same technique with women care in creating awareness and advocacy. And we also recognize existing climate frameworks. For example, the way what Sharleen mentioned about the network of medical students that we have. So we use the medical students to pass information while engaging in their daily activities in the community. I'm very passionate about storytelling and advocacy, so it's something that I will keep going back to. Just using words and using stories to pass down knowledge, to inform each other, and as a way to make the community feel seen. Because from my experience, people make commit to long-term solutions when they feel like they're being seen, when they feel like they're part of the solutions themselves. So I believe storytelling can be a way to do that, and is what we are also doing at Women Care. Yeah.
Yeah, to add on that, Daisy, I think you've really said it well. One of the things also we are trying to do is just the originality of the kind of work we want to embrace. Our aim is also to highlight as many women's stories as possible. So I think that will bring us to the point of just appreciating that we are not seeking how the global north, they are doing their own way of climate advocacy. But for us, we're also trying to appreciate our culture and how we would like to create that awareness. So just being very cautious about maintaining how we from Africa will do our things, and not only that, but also based on the kind of challenges that we are facing in this field. I think that's really important. Another thing is that when we talk about traditional healing. We also encourage a lot of, home healing, home conversations. And also one of the things we are trying to do in this lens is that we're also empowering women to take up spaces in these careers, So for example, if we have more women interested in climate change and the intersection of health, for sure we'll come up with really interesting research topics, research ideas. And I think that's the goal, to have more women, more voices. And I think that will preserve that kind of knowledge. And of course, it will pass on also that traditional healing, because, women really like to share knowledge with each other. So when we create that awareness and they're able to share that and pass it, I think it's a good way of also just preserving the culture, and the traditional way of how our communities would feel comfortable in addressing this topic, and also healing at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I love the idea of bringing in, community gatekeepers such as elders. I don't think there is an African community out there where elders are not seen as really important knowledge bearers and responsible for their community. So I think it's really important and powerful to include them in these things, especially since sometimes older people have a little bit of a hard time understanding climate change. So it's important to bring them on board. And I just wonder, what are some everyday practices you encourage in your communities that promote care for both your body but also Earth?
I could go
So,
first. Okay,
okay.
Daisy, please.
No, you can go
No, Daisy.
first. Go ahead, Sharleen. It's fine.
Okay. Um, how to promote care? One of the things we're really trying to do is, and of course we're not perfect, but is to try and share a lot of self-care tips through our platforms. I think that's really important. Let's say when we have heat waves, just trying to share things about healthy hydration, and also the kind of campaigns we do. They aim to. One of the things in our community we're really facing is that climate change is not a space where people are aware of it. So also taking care of yourself involves also knowing what is going around, or what is going on with you. So also just to create that knowledge of, hey, when you see this, this is climate change. When you see this is climate change. I think that's really important. And we also have the team of senior students, as I was saying. What they do is that they do act as ambassadors to this. I think when we see medical students who are in future going to be doctors talking about this issue, I think it does speak volumes even to our communities. And we do encourage them, even as they meet different patients in the hospital, to kind of kickstart these conversations to even understand, do you know about climate change? And for us, I think that's a really big step of just ensuring that the community is not only aware, but they also are trying to take care of themselves through the different tips that we share. Daisy?
And to add on to that, I would say we encourage mindful consumption because we put out a lot of information about climate change. We try to put out the information in as simple as we can, but also we understand that it can be very overwhelming to constantly get knowledge and information that your world is changing and you need to assumption. As much as we are working towards change, we also encourage being mindful, taking care of yourself and your community. I really encourage checking in on each other, even just because climate change can feel like such a big topic to get into as an individual. So we encourage going at it bit by bit. The little knowledge that you have, sharing it with the community next to you as you take care of yourself, just being aware that you are an individual who also needs care just as much as you're also taking care of the environment. Yeah.
Beautiful. And I think, all of these things are accessible for people who have different resources available to them, which I think is a really important point to make that, thinking of intersectionality, we also need to consider the intersection of social class, financial backgrounds. So I love that you guys mentioned things that are accessible for all people. I think that's really important. And Sharleen, I know that you have to drop soon to go to another meeting. So thank you so much for your time and really, really appreciated the conversation. And now I'll move to questions that are focused on Tafadzwa. You work with new ideas and technology to help communities fight climate change. How can these tools help people live in healthier ways with the planet?
Thank you very much for the question. I'll just give an example of some of the work that we're doing back here in Zimbabwe. So we're working with rural women who are on the forefront of the climate crisis and who are affected by the social and economic norms and issues in their community. And we wanted to amplify and empower them through the use of clean energy. Because they normally use dirty energy, which is cutting down of trees and firewood for them to cook and to set a meal on their table. So we brought in a new idea of venturing into biogas technology, where they use their waste, cattle waste, human waste, as well as household waste to generate energy. So this is not just healing themselves, but also healing the planet, the environment they are in. So they pay back by planting a tree. So it's an ecosystem where we are saying, how can we improve the health of women, and also how can we empower them to ensure that they also live in a sustainable and healthy environment? And also, how can we also bridge the gap or empower them in the social and economic challenges they are facing? So this kind of work is showing that women are also capable of, being resilient and able to innovate and able to be part of the solution and be part of the cause despite the environment they are in. So using this kind of way to generate energy has made them to also heal within their communities, healing them in their environment. So it's not only healing themselves by moving away from cutting down trees and using firewood, but also healing the planet that they are surrounded by.
I think that's really beautiful, that it helps people to feel like we're not just victims of the circumstances or the world that we inherited, but we can also do things to help not only ourselves, but help the planet that we live in. And even one individual can help, make a difference, especially considering that individuals make up communities. And I think that people sometimes underestimate their strength when it comes to climate change. But it's important to note that. You work with many groups from local communities to bigger organizations. How can we include kindness and fairness when we're making plans to deal with climate change?
So the issue with fairness, when we're like in a big organization, international organizations, there's issues of racism and discrimination because of probably women of color, and probably because you're from the global south or because you're way more behind. And I think as she changes climate, what we mostly focus in is to bring that fairness that despite the color or despite where you come from, your voice is important and everyone has different ways and different solutions to bring to the table, despite religion or despite where you come from. So I also think that, bringing the issue of fairness and not looking at who's who or who's what or what title do they carry. It's a more of looking at someone as just a basic person who's making a difference in a community, with that fairness and kindness, and to say whatever they are bringing to the table, it's because it's decent, it's human, and because they have something important, something vital, and something to make a difference, despite of color, despite of gender, or despite of religion. So I think being in that international space has also made me to realize that we are not alone, and to look as with another person the same, not to discriminate because of where they come from, even though in the space it's a bit tough because there's a lot of racism and a lot of discrimination. But I think we are getting there somehow, that you know we are the same because we are fighting for the same cause. We are not in competition. We are fighting for the same thing, and having that one voice being said and being talked about to bring about solutions despite the climate crisis we are in. So the issue of fairness and kindness, it's a matter of taking one's voice despite where they come from, despite their religion or their gender or where they're coming from.
Absolutely. And I think that you make a really important point, an unfortunate point, that in these massive organizations, they're not free of racism, unfortunately, and sexism. It's unfortunately still really, really big issue. And I was surprised to see to the extent that it's still an issue, especially when it comes to climate change. Some people have, I would say, problematic views on who is capable of doing what globally. And I've seen some opinions about African nations, and the fact that they are not pulling their weight, so to speak, when it comes to climate action, which I think is really unfair mischaracterization of what's really going on. So I think that what you said is really powerful and important for people to note. And we all are joined together in this fight. Unfortunately, it does affect us disproportionately in the global south, but that's even more reason to be inclusive, and come together on this really important matter. Fighting climate can, of course, be really stressful and tiring. How do you take care of yourself when working in tough or busy situations?
That's a very interesting question for me because I've taken that journey beginning of this year. I wasn't someone who would take time to myself and say I want to do self-care because I was only physicted. I was only focusing on work and making a difference. But being able to join a focus group on mindfulness, the Palm Village, it helped me to ensure that I also take care of myself before I get to take care of the planet and the people around myself. So I just do the basics. I take a walk almost every single day with my dog, and I get to be encouraged by my partner. He's always pushing me to say, Tafadzwa, you need time to yourself. You also need to run, you need to jog, you need to walk. So I think I've taken that time to myself, that I also need to be mindful of the work that I do, be mindful about myself, and also just, a 20 minutes break is enough to just rest, and to pause and to breathe And I think the Palm Village mindfulness community has also helped me to take care of myself with the work that I do. So it's basically of a community where we encourage each other to take space and to take care of ourselves, to breathe, and to say, you know what, even if you breathe, you won't be left behind. Yes, even if you pause, because the issue is if I pause or if I breathe, then time is ticking. There's a lot of things happening, so I need to keep up. But then you cannot keep up when you're exhausted. And not taking a pause. So it's okay to breathe, and it's okay to say no, and to say, okay, I'm on a holiday, or I'm out of office for the whole week. Just taking time to yourself. So I practice mindfulness. I do yoga. I take a walk. I do gardening as well. I think gardening has also helped me as an individual. So I don't buy any greens here. I do gardening, so it has also helped me to, take care of myself, to breathe, and also to reflect on the work that I'm doing as an individual.
Love that. I love to garden. I think anyone who can do it, who has the space to do it, do it. Even if it's like one little seed, it's amazing and it's very soothing. It's great for anxiety. And I think you make some really valid points, especially as an activist. I think you feel like your work is never done and almost a sense of guilt if you pause, but it's so, so important to do so. And, small things like a walk, yoga, just showing up for yourself in that way is really powerful and really important. So I think, everybody take note. There's good stuff right here.
Yes.
So, how do you help people live in a way that is better for the planet without shaming them or making people feel like they need to be a perfectionist? Because this is a hot topic when it comes to climate change. Many people do things that are really bad for the environment, but it's sometimes divisive to shame them, to put them down for their choices. So how do you strike that balance of making people aware but not making them feel ashamed?
I think for me, I focus more on empowerment and not judgment, because when you're shaming someone, you're being judgmental of whatever small cause or whatever issue that they have carried out. And some people, they generally just don't know that whatever they are doing is bad for the environment. They are not aware, they are not cautious aware. So when you bring in the aspect of being shameful, they won't be able to now, see where you're coming from. Even if I'm to like sit down and speak now to say, you know what, this is bad for environment, littering, it's bad, they won't take you in that way because already you're being judgmental that or people are always littering around. They're not aware of the environment. They're not cautious about a clean environment. But it's also the issue of not looking at it in a judgmental way, but to empower them just to say basic climate education, to be aware, because people don't really know. We are talking about climate change, but I feel like there's also a huge gap that people are not aware of what's happening in their communities. Yes, we talk about it. We go on panels. We do it on social media. But an average person in our community does not know the basic of to say, if I'm to litter, it's bad for the environment. Or if I'm to plant a tree, it's good for the environment, it's good for myself. So it's prioritizing about empowering them to ensure that we educate, we talk about it. Because if I talk to one person about it and they feel inspired, they're also going to talk to another person, and it's going to be a cycle. It's going to reach everywhere. So focusing more on empowering them with the knowledge and tools to say, this is what's happening in our communities and how can we make a difference? How can we come together as a community to make a difference, to ensure that we are in a safe and healthy environment without being judgmental about it or being shameful about it. Yeah. I
Oh,
think
that
that's
is
it.
beautiful. I mean, preach, girl. Girl, you could make some t-shirts out of that. Like, yes, all here for that. I love it, love it, love it. And you make a good point about social media. Like you can post on social media, but not everyone, unfortunately, might see that because what we have to remember, social media can be powerful at amplifying certain voices, but then they're also people do get stuck in little bubbles. Daisy, would you
Mm-hmm.
like to add something?
Oh, yes. I would like to give an example of empowerment over judgment. I think it's a really interesting point because there's a conversation that has been going on Kenyan Twitter about littering in Nairobi, in the city. Everyone is complaining about how the fact that there are no bins within the city, but also it's a realization that it's upon us as citizens to not litter, even if the government has not made bins accessible to everyone. We are not supposed to just go around and litter. I think it was a really interesting highlight of how counterproductive judgment can be, because people reacted in a very fierce way when someone tried. It was like pointing fingers, like uh, why are you littering, in a very accusatory way. So I thank you so much for that point about empowerment. I think it's very important when approaching education and also just encouraging people to take action in our communities. Yeah. I thought it was very interesting with that conversation currently ongoing.
Yeah, I mean, that argument is as old as time itself in Kenya. Like, who's to blame? Are we going to blame citizens or are we going to blame the government? Government, of course, has a huge role in these things, but at the end of the day, you also have to hold yourself accountable. And I think generally in climate change, this is a big thing. Like, yeah, we can blame governments because they're not as responsive as we would like them to be, but we also need to understand that we play a role too, and everyone needs to be responsible for that. But in a way that is with loving kindness and not judgment, because some people just simply don't know. So let's hold space for that. I love it. So, can you share some easy examples of how people, can take care of themselves and the environment at the same time? You guys can both answer if you'd like.
Yeah, I think just to continue and also just to add on, I also feel like it's also about the progress and also not being perfect in whatever we're doing. And I think I've also given some of the examples of gardening. I also speak of the women that were empowering, who are using their waste, their household waste, and turning them into, their gardens and the energy, into biogas energy. So they're at their home. They don't litter anything. They don't throw away anything, and of course, there is no any paper. So their basic waste, like what they cook, they reuse it. So I think ways that we can also do as individuals is to recycle and to use anything and everything that we have at our homes, because we tend to buy, but we can as well recycle and reuse these things that we have at our homes. Just the basic of even how I live sustainably. My example for my neighbors, they have chickens and rabbits. So the waste that comes out from the chickens is what they use in their vegetables and in their garden. So nothing goes to waste. Um, so that's some of the example that we can all live in, just to live a sustainable and healthier life. And also, when you talk about sustainability, is it sustainable? Like, do we need to continue to buy, or to invest? Because when we're buying, it's economically now challenging because we're continuously buying things that are not necessary. When we can use things and recycle and reuse the things that we have in our homes. So I also believe it starts with us. It starts with as an individual. with our surrounding, where we are, our community, before we even go to the communities. So those are pretty much some examples that I've seen some people doing, just living a very mindful and sustainable life that is amazing.
Beautiful. I mean, my mom also uses manure from her chickens, ducks, all of that. So I think that's really great. I love that.
I think Tafadzwa has covered most of the examples that I had in mind, but I would also like to add on embracing slow living, because in recent times everything has been so fast-paced. A lot of people are engaging in fast fashion. So I think for more sustainability, it would help all of us and the planet if we just slow down a bit. Embraced slow living and taking care of ourselves as we take care of our planet. So that's one example that I would add on to what Tafadzwa has shared.
Yeah, and just to also add on to what Daisy says, like the fashion industry is going, it's increasing rapidly, and it's waste. And if you see most of the fashion that's there, it's being dumped in Africa. The fast fashion, it's really increasing every single day, and it goes back to how the fast fashion industry is even acquiring this kind of. It's more like capitalism. So it's quite it's another topic to discuss.
Absolutely. We could do a whole webinar on that.
Yes.
Gosh. No, I agree with you guys. And, you know, like, for example, in Kenya, I grew up feeling like secondhand was, you know, something like we all bought secondhand, but like you didn't really want to go around school telling everyone. You wanted to be like, oh yeah, this is new.
Yes.
And that is a shame. That's a shame. You know, it's almost like we've been brought up with this view that new is good, old is bad, a reused isn't good. And I'm like, no, we need to change this view because it's just not true. And also, you can get way better quality if you buy secondhand because fast fashion is produced massively and not really great quality. So you can find that you bought yourself a cute little top. In a year after washing a couple times, it's done. And you know, where does it end up from there? In a landfill in the global south. And that's, I think, important to recognize. So I would like to open the floor up for discussion with the participants. If you guys would like to ask any questions to our panelists, feel free. If you don't feel comfortable you know, speak publicly, you can just write it into the chat as well. No one's feeling courageous. All right. Well, thank you both so much for your time. And this conversation has been really enlightening. And I just really love being able to, you know, sit down with fellow Africans and talk about issues that, you know, global issues, but also how it affects us locally, especially on the topic of climate change. As I mentioned earlier, I think that our voices are often missing in the conversations. So this is really powerful. I'll definitely be connecting with you ladies on LinkedIn, so you can expect a um, little connect request. So thank you all for your time. And if any one of you decide later on that there's something that came up, you can feel free to direct the question to Karapamoyo or to our panelists. So thank you guys so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me, and it was really an interesting and wonderful webinar. I'll see you on LinkedIn.
Yeah. All right, and thank you all to everyone that joined the webinar live. We've recorded it, so I'll share that with everybody. And then you can expect to find it also on Kurapamoyo's website. So thanks all for your time and have a lovely evening or night.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much.
Bye.
Bye.